Have you ever wondered why prices keep going up year after year? You get a raise, you are saving, you're doing everything right, yet you're unable to afford the same amount of goods and services that you were last year. Well, there is no secret. This is the great theft of inflation, and that is the purpose of today's episode. Thank you for joining me again. As I mentioned, today we're going to talk about inflation. So let's start by just talking about that word. When you hear the word inflation, typically you will think about just prices going up, but inflation is actually an expansion, and it can be an expansion of supply of things. It can be an inflation of a price, but in today's episode, I want to emphasize this inflation when it comes down to the money supply. So let's start talking about for a second. Up until the year 1913, the US was still operating under a gold standard, meaning that every dollar that you had was backed up by a certain amount of gold that was stored by the government, and they had this fixed asset, this fixed thing in supply that was backing the monetary supply. If you think about, hey, let me produce more dollars, you cannot do that if you're in a gold standard, meaning you need to have that much more gold to back up those new dollars. Now, in 1913, the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the US, got created, and we started deviating from a gold standard to a fiat standard. That ultimately got consolidated in 1971 by the Nixon shock, where President Nixon said we're basically parting ways from the gold standard completely, even for international trades. And ever since, we're in 100% fiat standard, meaning the only thing that drives the supply of how much money is in circulation is not any asset that is limited in supply, but rather the government saying we need more money. And now you will think that this only happens in cases of emergency, but think about how every year the government comes out and says, well, I need this much money, which is the budget to be able to fund military, social security, all these other programs, my own operations. And it has been a while that that budget has been beyond what the government can actually afford. And that's the reason why you see all this news about the government raising the debt ceiling and trying to avoid a shutdown. The government is fucking broke. They don't have the money. And the only thing beyond this grandstanding and circus about let's raise the debt ceiling or not, the reality is that the only thing that they have been doing for the past, decades or so, has been just approving budgets that are beyond the GDP, beyond what the country is producing on a yearly basis. And what that has as a net effect is that if you have a government running on debt and you have, again, a budget that is beyond what the country itself is producing, then the only thing that it results with is a balance of debt. That's why you hear the debt ceiling keeping getting increased. And what you end up with is, again, a monetary expansion, because ultimately, every time the government approves these budgets and extends the debt ceiling and kicks the can for refinancing and whatnot, the only thing that they're doing is producing more dollars that are put in circulation for those programs, those incentives to be part of the economy. But if you're producing more dollars than the country is sustained with, you're devaluating your own currency. It's a currency debasement or devaluation. So they try to control it by trying to fool you and tell you, well, we are achieving a 3% inflation, and that is our target, and we're gonna do great with that. Well, point number one, just think about how that means that if last year inflation was 7% and the government says, well, this year is 3% inflation, let's all celebrate. There's nothing to celebrate because you're paying 3% in addition of the 7% increase that already took place last year. So it's a compounding effect, and it's a snowball that is not going to end well. That is the reason why today you see countries like Japan, like the UK, struggling because they have lowered their interest rates, Yet their treasury bonds, basically the debt that the government is issuing for it to be purchased by others, is not getting purchased by others. And basically they're hitting rates of 4-5%. And that means that the confidence of investors allocating their money in these governance is like, you're promising me a 4%? Well, no, even that is not good enough, because I know that that currency is going to lose value over time. Since 1913, the dollar has lost 96% of its purchasing power. Since 2020, it has been 25%. And the reason why is not because we're 25% more efficient and therefore we are spending less money. No, the reason is prices have been keeping rising because of an inflationary way of doing things by governments, by government spending. So that's point number one. And if you think about it, which is point number two that I want to leave here, technology and global commerce and innovations and competitiveness should drive prices down in general. There is no reason why it should be more expensive to produce a car next year than it is today. And yes, you will start telling me, well, the tariffs and the labor and these materials. Well, think about why those things keep rising in price. Tariffs are not a virtue of a global economy that is just self-calibrating. Is a government also trying to manipulate these taxes that are imposed on certain countries and in certain industries in order to try to capture more revenue, and that drives prices up. But it's not that the copper is tougher to produce, that metal is harder to find. In fact, there are recycling, there are technologies to use more advanced materials, glues, automation, robots. So why in the world, if manufacturing companies keep scaling, keep being more efficient, prices keep going up? You think about it, and the more you think about it, is not because there is less capacity to produce more cars or more iPods or more TVs. Quite the opposite. It's easier and easier to produce them, to export them, to package them, to add great features to them. And those features, yes, they sell them as upsides and as great things that you will capture from the new model of this new MacBook or this new Tesla or whatever. In reality, for Elon Musk, for Tesla, for Apple, it is exactly the same or marginally just a change in their cost structure for producing an iPhone, for producing a TV, for producing a new device, unless it's a cutting edge technology that has not been seen in the past, and that is the first time that you're producing it. Then yes, you can justify a market price that you are establishing. But if you're competing with the entire world on producing whatever thing that is made from plastic, a mug, a car, a TV, then prices should always trend down. Why isn't the case of that? And why is the case that is, if you save in dollars, whatever you can afford today won't be able to afford you the same next year? Well, it's precisely because of this monetary expansion. The fact that when you have more of the same, that very thing that you're expanding then trends to be worth less. And that's exactly what has been happening with the dollar, what has been happening with the euro, what has been happening with the pound. So just reflect on that and reflect on how Bitcoin, on the flip side, has a hard cap of 21 million coins that will never be surpassed. No matter how much government pressure, how much struggle there is in a certain population, how much miners there are introduced into the system, the Bitcoin network calibrates so that it's always running at a fixed pace of a block getting certified every 10 minutes and a fixed supply of 21 million coins that basically get rewarded with mines over time. And each 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. So the rewards get lower and lower and lower for miners to prevent any kind of monetary expansion. Now, gold, silver, some other metals have functioned similarly to Bitcoin in the past, but you need to know that these metals do have a supply that keep increasing over time. For instance, gold increases at a 2% supply expansion on a yearly basis. And I know that silver, I know that copper have a even higher rate of expansion. So yes, right now, these metals are being pursued by traditional investors because they see the stress in Japan, in UK, in the US, with treasury bonds, basically government debt, not being purchased by investors, confidence not being there for governments, and how they will be able to keep their currencies worth over time. And that is exactly what has been driving gold prices to go up, silver prices to go up, and in fact, reaching all-time highs. I can tell you, if that has happened with gold, if that has happened with silver, it will happen with Bitcoin, and it will happen more aggressively so, because it has a limited fixed supply, which is not the case with gold, and it's not the case with silver or copper or any other metal for that matter. So please pay attention. Take a look at those hard assets that are limited in supply. That's why sometimes art, sometimes things that are scarce tend to get appreciation in value. And it's no surprise, it's because scarcity and more demand to that scarce asset only can drive prices to go up. If there is more demand and there is no more supply, the only thing that can go up is the price. Anyway, hope that you have gotten some value out of this content. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until the next one, see ya.